Hello friend! Today I wanted to share with you a few tips for getting started with dip pen hand lettering. I want to be clear, I don't have a super formal style. I don't do like copperplate calligraphy, but I do love using the dip pen for a more modern hand lettering style. So if you love modern lettering and calligraphy, then I hope this will help you out. So first things first, let's talk about basic supplies. I have tried several different inks over the past couple of years, and some of my favorites have been the Higgins Eternal Black ink and the Dr. P.H. Martin's ink. I have two different kinds here. One is this iridescent one on the left, and the other is the Bombay ink on the right. I enjoy both of these, especially the gold. You may also want something to pour your ink into. I use these really inexpensive holders, which I did buy them, but if you were into any kind of woodworking, you could probably make this wood part pretty easily, and then just buy containers to go into them. You could also just use something that you already have, but I do think you'll want it to be somewhat narrow so that you can dip your pen far enough into it without having to use a ton of ink to fill it up. I will link some inexpensive holders below, but feel free to get creative here. And of course, you will need a holder and a nib. There are two popular types of holders, the oblique holder and the straight holder. I have gone back and forth preferring both at different times. It just kind of depends on what I'm used to and what I've been practicing with. But I tend to go back to the straight holder most often, and I really like this one that has a cork grip, and I tend to use that one the most. As for a nib, there are several different nibs that are recommended for beginners. I will create a blog post to go along with this video, and I'll list some of those in the blog post. But I tend to go back to the blue pumpkin nib. I think it's a good option for beginners who like this modern style because it has a good contrast between thick and thin strokes that I think looks really nice for a modern hand lettering style using a dip pen and ink. So when you dip your nib into the ink, you're going to want to make sure that you get the ink above the air hole. This is why having a more narrow container to hold your ink is nice. You don't have to dip it in super far, but just enough to cover that hole. If you're using a brand new nib, you may want to clean it well first. There are a few different ways that people say to do this. I tend to just try to wipe mine clean a few times after dipping it in ink. So next I want to talk about how to hold your pen. When you are beginning to letter with a pointed pen, you're going to want to make sure that you're holding it at a nice angle. I know that in brush lettering we have lots of different ways and angles to hold our brush pens. I typically hold my brush pen like this, which I know some people don't appreciate, but it's not that I don't know how to hold my pen differently. This is just what works for me with brush lettering and what helps me create the kind of brush lettering that I want to create. But when it comes to lettering with a pointed pen, I do use a different hold so that I'm able to hold my pen more at the right angle. This might also look a bit different if you are using an oblique holder, but I think that our goal here is to be around a 45-ish degree angle. So now we are ready to actually use our pointed pen. Before getting into the alphabet, I think it's a great idea to just get the feel for your pen. You don't have to use any formal strokes if you don't want. Just practice writing with it. Squiggly lines, zigzags, whatever you want. Just to get the feel for those thick and thin strokes. You will use this one kind of like a brush pen in that when you are writing a downstroke or pulling the pen towards yourself, you will apply a bit more pressure. And when you're writing an upstroke or writing the pen away from yourself on the paper, you will apply less pressure. This is what's going to give you the contrast between thick and thin strokes. Once you've gotten a feel for writing with your pointed pen, you can move on to trying to create some more intentional strokes. I love the idea of starting with basic strokes or drills. After I filmed this section where I was practicing these fun strokes, I enjoyed it so much that I created a free printable worksheet for you to use in your own pointed pen practice. You can find this on my website in the free resource library at howtohandletter.com/resource library. If I was a beginner, I would practice these drills over and over until they felt a little bit more like second nature to me. And only once this feels pretty comfortable for me would I move on to hand lettering the alphabet. This is where my lack of being too technical comes in because, like I mentioned, I like to use a dip pen for a modern calligraphy style. So when I'm lettering with a pointed pen, it looks a little bit like my brush lettering style. It's maybe a bit more bouncy and maybe a bit smaller, but that's really just what I have found is comfortable for me over time. If you already have a hand lettering style that you love, I'd recommend for you to just start there. Just like in brush lettering, I think letter formation and how to use your lettering tools are good to learn separately. What I mean by that is if you're trying to learn a new tool like a pointed pen or a brush pen, but you're also trying to learn how to form your letters at the same time, I think that can feel a little bit harder than it needs to be. But if you already feel comfortable with one or the other, to me, I think that makes it a little bit more of an enjoyable process. Obviously, there are all kinds of different ways to do this, so if you want to try them both together, that is just fine. But as you are creating your lettering, I would recommend trying to go nice and slowly and really focusing on your pressure and your letter formation. If you are new to hand lettering and are interested in learning more about brush lettering and modern calligraphy, I have a free 7-day course that walks you through learning how to hand letter as a beginner. It's totally free and you can sign up today at howtohandletter.com/mini course. I'll leave the links for these in the description box below as well. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in my next one.